All right. Hello, Pomona. Welcome. My name is Jesus Sanchez. I am the Executive Director of Gente Organizada, a Pomona-based nonprofit organization. Gente recently reached out to our friends at Funding the Next Generation, and we thought it would be a really good idea to get some expert voices when it comes to budgets to speak on our city budget here in Pomona. And we're going to be taking a closer look and discussing our budget and the impacts of the pandemic, the uprisings, and really what we're hearing right now is calling for a greater investment in youth and community programs, calling to reimagine what public safety really means, right? So I'm looking forward to this conversation, and thank you, Ed and Margaret from Funding the Next Generation, from being here. Ed, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and your work as it relates to budgets?
Sure. The name is Ed Harrington. I was the auditor controller for San Francisco for 17 years. So a lot of work on city and county budgets as part of that. Then I was in charge of utilities, water, power, and sewer for the city. Was also the president of the Government Finance Officers Association of the United States, focusing a lot on budgets along with accounting. And right now I'm a professor at the University of San Francisco in the Masters in Urban and Public Affairs program, teaching young people how to look at financial information about cities and counties.
That's awesome. Thank you, Ed, for being here. Sounds like you know your way around a budget then.
Been there a few times.
A couple times. Margaret, thanks again for being here. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work around youth investments?
Yeah, my name is Margaret Brodkin, and I'm the founder and director of Funding the Next Generation, which I founded after 35 years of experience trying to increase investments in kids, both as the director of the city's Department of Children, Youth, and Their Families, and the director of the city's major, that would be San Francisco, child advocacy organization. And the goal is to help cities and counties around the state increase their investment in children. So we've worked with 50 different places around the state because children don't vote, and we want our budgets to reflect our values. And it is very important that we rethink how we do budgeting so that children become a priority in the budget. We're sort of locked into a very traditional way of looking at what local budgets need to be about, a very traditional way of defining what public safety, for instance, is. And our goal is to help communities really broaden how they look at their budget and increase their investments in children and youth.
Thank you for being here, Margaret, and thank you for your work in laying a foundation and challenging the way we look at our budgets and invest in our young folks across this state. So it's a pleasure to have both of you here. Let's jump into it. So currently in Pomona, there is a great concern regarding our city budget. I'm happy as an organizer that folks are taking a closer look at it now. I've had the privilege of working with youth organizers from the Pomona Students Union, and this group of students have been pushing for years for a greater investment in young people. Ed, I've heard this before. I've heard this saying that city budgets are like artifacts that folks in the future will be looking back to study our communities and our societies as to how we valued one another and the things that we prioritized, right? With that in mind, when it comes to Pomona and our community's investment in youth, what is your expert assessment? Are youth valued in our budget?
Yeah, you're right that budgets are not just a financial document. They are the policy expression for the community for that next year. And it is where you put your money where your mouth is and where you really test your values. And so if you look at Pomona, they say that the motto of the town, the vision for the town is a vibrant, safe, beautiful community. One of the things we want to do is focus on the future. That's one of the goals. But if you look at the budget, over 50% of the budget goes to the police department. Another over 25% goes to the fire department. And what that means is that almost 80% of the budget is going into police and fire, and thanks for bringing up table 3 of the budget. So it shows right there that if you're looking at a budget of $118 million in the general fund, which is really where you have the opportunity to rearrange money and spend it in different ways, you're talking over $90 million of it are for police and fire. If you look through the budget document, it's hard to see where you say anything about youth. There is a little bit about youth in neighborhood services, but you can see neighborhood services is less than 4% of the entire budget as it is. And so it's going to be a small part of the smallest part of the budget before you're talking about youth. And so if you want to talk about where the values of Pomona are, the values according to your budget document are police and fire, and only police and fire. Everything else is 20% of the budget.
Yeah. Ed, it's been said, we've heard through the grapevine that some within the city claim that our community, our city, is spending over $15 million in youth. Is there any way that as a community member, as you know, a nonprofit here that's advocating for young folks, is there any way for us to confirm that in looking at these documents? Is it reflected within these budget documents?
If it is, I couldn't find it. Now, some cities and counties do what's called a program budget, and a program budget does allow you to look at what's the program for seniors, or what's the program for children and youth. How are we dealing with segments of our society that we want to value and want to promote and want to support? That's not the way Pomona does their budget. And so, again, you could do a search on the word youth possibly, but the only place I could find youth was in a special youth program in neighborhood services. And frankly, if you can't get that kind of a list of what programs people say are youth programs, what you're sometimes stuck with are things that don't feel like youth programs to you. They may be that youth are served as part of a larger community or something else, and someone just says, oh, youth are included, we'll take part of that money. So unless they can give you a list of those programs and what they do, it's hard to really say that there's 15 million there and that it's being used for things that you think are important for youth and families.
Thank you, Ed. And Margaret,
yeah, because I would add to that when we help people with their budgets and define youth, we define programs as specifically for youth, not when youth are part of the general population. So that is, I think, what we mean when we're talking about youth services.
Yeah. And Margaret,
the one place I did see youth services, was in that neighborhood services. And just to point out, even there, that one line item for special youth programs was $186,000 in 18-19. And for next year, they're proposing it actually will be cut a little bit. It would drop to about $170,000. So while your total budget is not dropping and you're giving raises to your employees, you're actually cutting the one place I could find for youth.
I believe that's the only place in the budget, where the word youth or children, and I don't think children appears, but where the word youth appears in the budget.
A question for you, Margaret. Is this type of investment in youth or lack thereof typical in other cities? I know you'd spend a lot of time analyzing communities' investment in young people across the state. Where does Pomona fall?
Well, it's hard to tell because, as we've said, there's no place where youth are specifically mentioned. We have worked with a number of cities around the state, and I think this is pretty extreme in the extent to which community services for young people play such a minor role in the budget, even though it is typical that youth are not funded as well as we think they should be. This is the most extreme case of that just in terms of looking at the budget that I think we have looked at.
Ed, would you like to chime in on that question?
Yeah, it is interesting that a lot of people think that when you talk about children and youth services, they say, oh, that's Health and Human Services, that's the county, or the school districts takes care of education. And as a city, I really don't have any particular responsibility to take care of youth in my community because other agencies are doing that. That's not true. And that's not the way others have viewed this. They view the city as also having a responsibility to really provide services to children and youth and their families.
Yeah, thank you, Ed and Margaret. What advice, Margaret, I'll start with you. What advice would you give city leaders in places like Pomona that are facing great pressure to increase youth and neighborhood services while also facing budget challenges right now, right? What advice would you give those folks?
To invest in youth, to figure out ways to reallocate the money that you do have so that you make young people a priority. And then places that have done that have benefited enormously. Not only do young people, you know, their development is encouraged and they grow into stronger citizens. A lot of problems that cities have are reduced. Arrests go down, mental health problems go down. Young people are more engaged in school. It really builds community. It ends up being so cost effective because it is so expensive to take care of problems of young people once they arrive. And also, it creates a wonderful partnership between the community and government. And lastly, I'd say in the places that have increased their investment in young people, they can leverage that investment. You end up getting more money. Foundations see that you as a city are willing to invest in young people, and then they're willing to invest. And you can use that money to match other money, to match state and federal dollars. So you end up by putting dollars of your own, but being able to leverage many more dollars for your own young people. And that has happened every single place where people have increased their investment in young people.
Thank you, Margaret. What advice would you have, Ed?
Well, all that. And then also, it's one person's challenge, one community's challenge is another community's opportunities. You know, you can't ignore what's happening on the street right now. People all over the country are saying, wait a minute, is this really how we're going to spend our funds? Is this really what we're going to take care of our people? And people are saying, maybe public safety, as we've said, isn't just police and fire. You know, if you're talking about a safe community, of focusing on the future community, you're talking about food insecurity and homelessness and affordable housing and education and children and youth services. There's so many parts of that that you need to address to really focus on the future and really talk about a safe, vibrant community. And so if all your money goes into police and fire, you've lost the opportunity to say, what about everything else? And how do we take care of a holistic person and a holistic community and make that work? And so, yeah, things are tough. Things are always going to be tough. If it wasn't for the pandemic, it would be about retirement funds and pension obligations and those things. It's never easy. There's never extra money in budgets. And so you have to say, this is my priority. When push comes to shove, this is what I value and this is what I spend my money on, even if that means something else has to get cut a little bit to make sure you're doing things the right way. And so, yeah, it's a hard time, but it's exactly the hard times are when we make big decisions.
We are being called to make these kind of decisions right now. One of the cities that we're working with, for instance, has formally changed its definition of public safety to include youth investment because it has such a profound impact on the safety of a community.
Well, I want to thank you both. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Margaret, from Funding the Next Generation. For joining us and providing some expert analysis on our city budget here in Pomona. Funding the Next Generation has been a great resource for us at our organization and understanding the budgets of municipalities, and really been a great resource to our students and training them to be better citizens, more engaged citizens when it comes to government and the allocation of their resources, because of what you said, Margaret, they don't get to vote. They don't have a vote. And in Pomona specifically, a lot of our young people, they grow up in homes that don't have a vote at all because of the mixed immigration status of their families, right? So this is, for us, for Gente Organizada, this is critical work. And I just wanted to thank you and acknowledge both of you and the work that both of you have done on these issues throughout the state. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right.
Thank you.